Welcome to another special interview episode of Sri Lankan Cricket Podcast with Vida and Bora. And today we have a fellow podcaster as a guest. He's a broadcaster and a journalist, and he's the host of Murali End podcast. Welcome to Sri Lankan Cricket Podcast, Mark.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've always wanted to represent Sri Lanka at cricket, and this is maybe the closest I'll get being on the Sri Lankan Cricket Podcast.
Glad to have you with us, Mark. Big fan of the Murali End podcast. Would you be able to tell our listeners out there how the podcast came about and where did it all start for these shows to kick off?
Yeah, so basically, as you know, there was a bit of a void in decent T20 franchise cricket that thankfully was fulfilled by Sri Lanka Cricket last year when they started the Lanka Premier League. Which attracted all the best players from around the world who didn't turn up because they were worried about getting paid. But that's a different story. But, but me and some of my friends were talking about franchise cricket. And these aren't people who have any Sri Lankan, obviously my family's from Sri Lanka, which is why I support, one of the reasons why I support Sri Lanka. But I was just talking to them. I was like, look, guys, they're starting this new T20 tournament. How about we just do a podcast and talk about it? Because I was like, I think there's some exciting players coming through. I think this is a really interesting time for Sri Lankan cricket at that moment because, just after the restart, I think, some interesting things might happen. And also, we're all going to watch it. We're all broadcasters anyway. So, we work in that area. Let's just do something about it and see what happens. So that's what we did. And then after the Lanka Premier League finished, we ended up getting caught up in the India-Australia series, which, for my money, I think was one of the best test series of all time. I know you guys are in Australia, right? So, you were closer to the action. Yes. And then it's just kind of rolled on from there. Then England were in Sri Lanka, then England were in India. And then cricket's kind of, it's non-stop, isn't it? There's always something to talk about. And now, obviously, we've just had the T20 World Cups coming to conclusion soon, right?
Pretty similar to our story, Bora. I mean, we normally catch up to have a chat about cricket, and that's how we started this podcast. We haven't stopped since. So Mark lives in England, and he's the perfect person to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Cricket had its fair share of scandals over its history, and racism in cricket is the latest topic in town. What's going on with Yorkshire Cricket Club, Mark?
Oh gosh, where do I start? So they're basically embroiled in a massive racism scandal. This has been kind of rumbling on for 3 years now. This week, it all kind of came to the bubbled over, as it were, thanks to the good kind of journalistic work of people at ESPN Cricket Info, George DeBell, where it was revealed that one of the players was casually using the P word to a off spinner called Azeem Rafiq. And Azeem has been complaining for, he's launched an official complaint 3 years ago. Nothing really happened for about 2 years. Then a year ago, they launched an investigation. The investigation, which was an independent investigation, was basically covered up by Yorkshire. No one saw the report till about a week ago now, when ESPN were able to kind of leak out some of the stuff that was in it. The player that was accused of using the P word is Gary Balance, who fans of Test cricket will remember playing for England a few years ago. Then there was another former player who was accused of saying terrible things. It was later revealed it was Michael Vaughan is that player, as in the former England Test captain, former Yorkshire captain, now well-known pundit, works for Test Match Special on the BBC. I think he's at the moment, it's, as far as I know, he's still meant to be part of the Ashes coverage for Fox when that starts in a few weeks' time. Because of the way that Yorkshire dealt with this, the chairman's had to resign. Basically, the rest of the boards had to resign. The ECB had to parachute in Lord Patel to run the county, and also the ECB have taken Headingley's ability to host international cricket away from them so they can prove they've got their house in order. So it's been, considering that county cricket doesn't often make headlines in England, let alone anywhere else, it's been quite a week for Yorkshire Cricket Club. But if you've been following domestic cricket in England or just cricket in England for a few years now, you've known that this has kind of been bubbling under, and people have known that people have been wanting this kind of day of reckoning to come along, because a lot of people knew this was happening.
Yeah, Mark, exactly. I think you hearing in and out of passages where he's coming out saying this is happening, and in the media you hear Yorkshire's doing an investigation, but we're not hearing anything. Or I think still there's no 100% clarity of a proper report being set out. It's to know the versions of what's been happening, but you could feel that it was bottling up, and we've set into a World Cup stage, and we've seen the players talk about, the anti-racism that we promote or want the players to follow through. And now it appears to be things have just opened up. So would that be fair to say the World Cup had that stage for it to come out through? If not, it would have been dragged longer, you reckon? Or it was about time that this came out now?
I think the real. So, do you remember when that India-England test was cancelled on the morning of the test?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
when they were at Old Trafford. That was the day that Yorkshire they chose. I'm sure it's just by coincidence and not because there was another massive cricket story going on that day, to put out some of their findings and to try and get it kind of buried down the news agenda. I think that it's difficult because England has such a big reputation as a cricket playing nation. It's over the course of my lifetime, the profile of cricket in England has diminished. It's not as big as it was. When you speak to people, I was born in the mid-'80s, right? When you speak to people who were adults who were watching cricket in the '80s, they talk about the great '80s England team as being as famous and as well known as any of the footballers or any musicians of the day, right? Ian Botham was, everybody knew who Ian Botham was because of his exploits on the cricket field. I mean, obviously, there's obviously a comparison between Ian Botham and Ben Stokes in terms of what they've achieved in their career. Ben Stokes could walk into most bars or restaurants or clubs in England and not many people would know who he was. And, this is a man who's won World Cups with them, who saved Ashes tests for them. The profile of cricket in general has fallen down the pecking order. One of the major reasons for this, I think, is because cricket has failed to embrace the growing diversity in the UK. In England, there was a huge amount of people from the Black community who were playing cricket. Now that just doesn't happen so much. With this report, we're discovering that actually, if you're from an Asian background, so if you're Pakistani, Bangladeshi, or Indian or Sri Lankan, then you're not. You have to be exceptional to make it into the county setup at Yorkshire, and I've heard that it's the same for a lot of other counties as well, that they're not really doing their best to help young British Asian talent come through. And I think the sad reality of the situation is that if England can bring over India, Australia, Pakistan on a regular basis and sell out the international stadiums, and if people are still there to buy TV rights, which they will be because TV channels still need to have something on them, there is no real, until this report came out, there's been no real appetite to change the way cricket is run in the UK. It's almost like there's an acceptance that cricket is struggling. And I know obviously they've started things like the 100 and stuff like that. But there's just been an acceptance that English cricket is very far behind where it was, and B, football, and that's that. There's not much. It's like the established people who run the sport still want to continue running the sport, and the idea of letting more people in or widening the net, I think, kind of shocks a lot of people. With regard to whether it came out during the World Cup, I'll be perfectly honest here. That the way the sports news cycle works, having a World Cup right during while the football season, while the Premier League's being played, means the World Cup doesn't get very much coverage in the sports media at all. And on top of all that, I thought of the three formats, the T20 is the one they least kind of care about, even though arguably it's the format at the moment England the best at. So because I know, for example, in Sri Lanka, when the World Cup's on, it's the only thing people are thinking about or talking about. It's sadly for us, it's not the case in England. I mean, probably there was more kind of hype around the India-Pakistan game, because obviously there's very large Indian and Pakistani communities in England, than there was about any of the England games so far. I mean, that might change when they get to the final, if they get to the final.
Yeah, okay. I've been following the developments of the Yorkshire, this controversy, we want to put it that way. For me, I just have a feeling this is just the kickoff of a tidal wave that's going to be raced across. And I think the two countries that will be on top of it would be England and Australia as well, because of the diverse backgrounds across the nations. South Africa will come through as well. We've seen in the media that's it. Is that the feeling around that there are more to be rolled out in the future? If Yorkshire is going to trickle out further down, or?
Yeah, I think definitely. I'm expecting the next few days and weeks other counties might get caught up into it. I suspect if enough other counties get caught up into it. And I wonder if one of the reasons why the ECB acted so swiftly this week was because the ECB potentially are worried that they might get embroiled into it, and that there might be a bigger issue over here. Obviously, earlier on in a few months ago when New Zealand we had all those tweets from Ollie Robinson, the New England fast bowler, come out, and that didn't look too great. And there was a whole debate about what how he should be punished. I think the thing that's most shocking at the moment for a lot of people, I think, is the Michael Vaughan allegations, right? Because he was, he was the first Ashes winning captain I can remember for England. He's got a large profile in the media still. He writes in one of the national papers. He's one of the key figures in the BBC's cricket coverage, and I thought the article he wrote was was pretty ill timed, actually, and wasn't well written. And if I was him, I would have advised him to, if he's going to do that, to basically get interviewed for it. But that's a different conversation. And I think it's strange, because just before I was talking to you, I was talking to someone else about this, and I was like, if you're a non-white person, you understand that racism isn't just somebody calling you this word or that word, or you understand that it's more complex than that. And it's about the microaggressions and the way you speak to people and the tone you have and the expectations you have for people. And I think it's quite clear when you look at some of Michael Vaughan's tweets in the past that this man is a man who doesn't believe that all people are equal, or if he does, he doesn't treat people like that, right? Some of the, he wrote one of the tweets is about being in London and people not speaking English. And it's like, well, effectively what I can get from that is, even though I'm born and raised here, and have a British passport, and I've never had another passport for anywhere else, and never lived for any amount of time anywhere else, does Michael Vaughan consider me English? Like, there's the captain of the English cricket team. If I'm nowhere near good enough to get anywhere near it, but if I was in an England team with Michael Vaughan, would he treat me equally? I mean, I look at that tweet and think, I don't think he would. What if I was at the cricket with my dad and he heard my dad's accent, because my dad's from Colombo. He's still, even though he's lived here for all his life, for over 30 years, he still sounds like he's from Colombo. If he heard my dad talking to me, what would he think about my dad? Would he think my dad wasn't English? Like, does he think we're inferior? There's just in the English press, when the subcontinental teams are over, the way they talk about some of the players is, I find it's unbelievable. Like, some of the trope, Pakistani players are lazy, Sri Lankan players aren't good fielders. when I was growing up, we all loved listening to Tony Gregg talk about plucky Sri Lankans, right? And at the time, he was probably right. In the mid to late 90s, when Sri Lanka was first emerging as a giant cricketing powerhouse, it was special, I think, to see. It was something novel to see Aravinda De Silva knock a century, or Murali take a fifer against Australia, whatever. But now we've had like almost 30 years of that. Yeah, Sri Lanka are a giant cricketing nation. All right, we have our moments when we don't put together teams that are as competitive as previous teams have been. But like anyone who follows cricket will know that it's only a matter of time before we have another generation of great, another great Sri Lanka team will rise again. Sri Lanka haven't had just one team that won the World Cup in '96 and not done anything since. They had effectively the best white ball team for a lot of this century, right? But if you come and listen to the way a lot of commentators in the English media speak about the Sri Lanka side, or speak about the Pakistan side, or speak about professional cricketers from Bangladesh, they talk about them as if they're subpar athletes, as if they're not as professional as English players are. I compare and contrast that to the England team that I've seen during my lifetime, and this England team is quite a distant second place to the Sri Lanka side. It's maybe on par with kind of Bangladesh's achievements in that time period, and I'd say in looking at it from a more kind of Asian perspective, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka have been much better over that time period, and they've produced many more kind of world-class Hall of Fame cricketers than England have.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this makes me wonder, because I've been to England a few times to play cricket, but that was as a professional cricketer. And I'm not competing to fit into a side. So it's not the same. My experience there wasn't the same. So because I can't understand what these players has gone through. So what
was your experience like though? Like were you playing for a predominantly Sri Lankan club or Asian club or?
Well, I did play in Sri Lankan leagues as well, but it was mostly.
No, I mean in England, because one of the things that I think is pretty strange about the way the English league club system works is that some clubs are considered Asian clubs, some clubs are considered English clubs.
No. They were definitely English clubs, but I did play in some Sri Lankan leagues as well. There's a lot of Sunday leagues in especially around London. But like I didn't experience it in that way, because maybe I'm just a visitor, right? I'm there for a few months and I'll go back. But the closest I can think of is even in Sri Lanka, when you are competing for a spot, there's a rivalry between players. So is it something like that? Because someone's trying to take your spot in the team and he's from a different background. Is that something to do with this? So
it's hard to say, right? Because each individual will have a different experience. If you look at like Azeem Rafiq's career, though, it's quite tragic, because when he's an off spinner, and we know there's not many spinners at all in English cricket, right? But when he's coming up through, as a youngster, he's doing all the right things. He's in all the academies, he's in and around the kind of England under-19 setup and all that stuff.
He did captain, right? He did.
Yeah. He's captain. He's captain Yorkshire at I think at T20, right? At one point. Yeah. So, but the fact they've given him the captaincy shows that there's something about him. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not a player who's just struggling to be in the squad. Obviously, in England there is another issue, as I alluded to with spinners, where there's just some pitches where you're just never going to play a spinner, right? So I think that kind of impacts your career to a degree. But if you look at the fact that I think he's 31 now, and he's basically done with cricket. He's done with kind of county cricket, and you're like, in every other country in the world, spinners are coming to their prime at that age of their career, absolutely. Right? He should be in his prime. He should be like probably in the right back bang, almost in the middle of it. Yeah. But he's out the game. As far as I'm, from what I've heard, I think he's suffering a lot in terms of where he's been. I mean, he's talked openly about thinking about trying to kill himself and stuff like that. Yeah. So you can imagine how this kid has come through the academy set up. I mean, you guys will know you have to be really good at cricket to get to that kind of. For anyone to ever consider paying you money for it, you have to be amazing at it, right? Which I know, obviously, it's something you guys have done, and I'm in absolute awe of that. But so to get in and about there, and then to suddenly just fall off the cliff, you don't do that. And he's not had any. I don't believe he's had any major injuries. And then there was at one point when they just released him, and then they brought him back in a couple of years later. So. And I think the fact he's captain and stuff like that shows that as he was coming through, he was a confident child. I don't think there was any issues with him, before all of this. I think it's just that gradual erosion. I think it's that a lot of microaggressions, as I say, that for a lot of white English people, they don't understand that racism is a bit more than just calling somebody this word or that word, or being or saying, oh, you can't possibly play for Yorkshire because you're from Sri Lanka. It's not saying that. It's the little micro things you do, right? And I think if you look at what some of the stuff that Michael Vaughan does, it's those micro things he does, which isn't direct, but actually in a way have a much bigger impact. I always say, I acknowledge that I live in a society where racist people exist. If you're going to be racist, just come out and be racist to me, because then I could just confront it. If you're going behind my back and doing other stuff, or just slowly tightening the screw, I think that makes it much worse for you, for an environment to be in. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. I think so, Mark. I'm just touching. The word they use lightly is this banter. And I've like when you look back now, playing a lot of cricket, you come here and there are moments you think, what did I hear, or was that meant as a banter? But I feel something's not right. And that's me being an assistant playing in games, and he probably just aggression, not meant it, but you still got that in your back of your head, like exactly how you explained that micro term, that it's something's not right. What it's sad to see is a guy like Azeem Rafiq is like you say, he's homegrown, he's come through the junior ranks, captain, and he's in a setup where you think that that's home for him, right? And he feels, I can't, I'm getting into going down a hole kind of, this is not stopping, and I can't be there. That's what's worrying, because if it's someone like myself coming out of a setup, like Vida said, I went there, I didn't know. So you're thinking of or not, but then this is a homegrown junior who's coming through, and he can't cope with it anymore. So I could imagine how tough he would have been taking it on. And something I just want to touch base is, I think Vida and I spoke about with cricket, we talk about the teams. Adil Rashid had good passages of cricket. He's having his best time of cricket now under Owen Morgan, whereas earlier he couldn't perform. And I think he's also put at a statement and at a stage of his cricket where he said something's not right here. Is that fair, or could that be another example where the player's not in a space to perform, not doing well, but now he's in admittedly the English team is a diverse team that seems to be playing like what we want, want to see, that diverse or culture going around where everyone's welcome. Is that a fair reflection to have that set up between players, or
for me, I think I suspect he won't say anything till after the T20 World Cup. Now he's got to focus. Okay. He's got to focus on that. Yes. But I think if Adil Rashid says anything, that's massive. He's one of the superstars of the England team at the moment. Now he's going to have, he's having a great tournament. He'll quite potentially could end up as one of the top wicket takers. Obviously, we don't want anyone to take more wickets than Hasaranga, but that's a different conversation. So I do. It's interesting because obviously he's from Yorkshire as well, right? So I agree. I think there's been moments of his career which have kind of come up and down. I know to a degree, if you're a bowler, that kind of happens, right? Because you have to constantly keep working on your balls. But I think it's, if he says any, it'd be interesting. I'm waiting to see if he says anything. The other player I'm interested to see what his experiences are going to be like, or if he's going to say anything, is Murali, because I think he's a brilliant cricketer. I also, when I watch IPL, I also think he's probably more valued in Asia than he is in England, right? Where, you know, people still debate on, you know, he's recently just retired from the Test team, and you look at his Test record is superb, but he just doesn't have as many caps as you think he's going to have. He doesn't have as, you know, he's just not been as part of the setup as he should have been, I don't think. I mean, arguably England's Test team has been managed quite badly the last few years anyway. But I just wonder how, when he reflects on it, and it might not be something he wants to bring out now while he's still playing. It might be something he wants to talk about when he's retired. I know there's a few other players we've tried to get in touch with, British Asian players who just said they're not ready to talk about it, or don't want to talk about it, or have nothing to say about it. But I think, you know, this is definitely one of those stories that's we're going to keep talking about this for months, if not years to come, I imagine. And you know, it's interesting what you brought up Australia, because I wonder what's, you know, what could potentially emerge from Australia, because I've been to Melbourne and I know there's a lot of non-white players who play cricket in Melbourne, but not many of them make it through to, you know, to the Big Bash or beyond, right?
No, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of question marks. Does this case show England cricket has a wider problem with racism? You know, this raised a lot of question marks about that. And what do you think will happen next, you know, now that all this has come into spotlight?
I'm interested to see what the ECB do. I think it's easy for people like me to come onto programs like this and talk about all the issues, but I think solving it is much more difficult, right? When oh god, I mean, you don't need to talk, you know, if you Sri Lankans know more than anyone how difficult it is when there's an issue like this to try and get both sides to feel appeased, right? But I think they've got to put in kind of some safeguarding in place. I also think that they've got to put in transparency into how kids come through the academy, so you know, how they get into county setups and how they come through. So I think they've got to somehow put in, right, so if you know that your son is going for trials or is being watched, you should be able to go and get feedback, and they should be like, right, he needs to work on his batting or his, you know, his bowling, or do you know what I mean? They need to be able to give feedback at every step of that, so that you can't just turn around and go, you didn't pick my son because he's brown. Do you know what I mean? They need to be able to stop that, and there needs to be a system in place that if people do feel that they've been hard done by, if they do feel they've been a victim of racism or bullying, that they can report it, and it's looked into in a very transparent manner.
Do you think ECB will be opening up ways for players to have a chat regarding what has happened? Like if it's your contracted players, opening up an avenue where they can have that discussion without having any repercussions, or be open for that? Would that be something that's going to happen in the next few days or weeks as a result?
So what's happened over here is a lot of our ministers have got involved in this and have said how deplorable it is. There's a number of British Asian ministers in the government over here, and almost all of them have spoken out about it. So I think the ECB has basically kind of got to be seen to do something. A lot of the key people in it, including Azeem Rafiq and including the chairman of Yorkshire, are appearing in front of a government select committee to talk about it, where they'll have parliamentary privilege, so they'll be allowed to say anything they want, and there can be no legal repercussions. That's due to happen, I think, the end of next week. When that happens, I think that's when when people are open about it, I think that's when we'll see the extent of the problem, and we'll also see what very quickly the ECB will have to react before before government gets involved and tries to tell them what to do, basically. So I think that's why I think there'll be a reckoning for this. But yeah, as I say, I fully expect other people, in the next days and weeks to come out and reveal more stuff.
Yeah. I
And
think it's
go ahead, Bora.
sorry. Yeah. I think it's a tough time for cricket overall, but in England, hindsight, you have one of England's strongest white ball teams led by Owen Morgan, who's got a diverse team, which might help the changes what the ECB is going and have trust in the communities around England with the change that, yep, things are in place. That's how I see it. Like with these issues coming out from England, in leading into the World Cup, it's almost set in like I'd like to just a slightly bit off topic. We're going off. It's almost setting up like a Pakistan versus England final in terms of the issues that both countries have been, and both do require a win to come out of these issues. Is that how you would see it as well, or
Oh,
without?
I've not thought of it like that. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because obviously I've talked about being a Sri Lanka fan, right? And
Yeah,
I've talked about, essentially I was a fan because when I started watching cricket, they won the World Cup almost immediately, and I was like, oh well, this is brilliant. I'm gonna stick with these lads.
stick with that. Yeah.
Stick with that. Little did I know that in 2021 they'll. In May, at least in May of 2021, we'd be getting whitewashed by England. But I think it's almost too far gone now. That there's generations upon generations. So there's like 3 or 4 generations of British Pakistanis and British Indians and British Sri Lankans who've lived in England, born and raised, who just support the Pakistan, India, or where they come from. And I think it's going to take a lot for that to change. There is no love lost between the Sri Lanka fans who've been born and raised in England and England. Okay, I'm going to support England. I more want England to win the Ashes than I do Australia, but that's about the extent of my sympathies for the English cricket team. Do you know what I mean? I think there's the relationship that needs to be rebuilt between the British Asian community and the English cricket community. It's got a long way to go. I don't even know how they do it. I don't know what they do to rebuild that. I think it's just got to be trust. It's got to be the ECB have to kind of write off that maybe they've lost a whole generation of Asians again, and then try and build for the future to stop that happening.
We are coming to the end of this episode because Mark has other commitments to go to. And before you go, Mark, I want to ask, we've seen Kumar Sangakkara being the MCC president, and you talked about England cricket trying to resolve this problem. I mean, isn't it something that has to happen from top to bottom rather than going from bottom up? Is this something we'll see in the future?
I think it was a proud day for all Sri Lankans who live in Britain when Kumar Sangakkara got made MCC president. Though I'm so cynical, I was like, well, they're obviously doing that because they don't want him to move to Colombo or Australia, or live in Sri Lanka or Australia, and they want to keep all his cricket expertise in the Surrey region or Middlesex region. I wonder like what it means, but I do. The one thing I would say about it is that position is almost ceremonial, and that actually it doesn't really have much impact on the day-to-day running of cricket in the UK and the day-to-day culture of it. And I think it's obviously great to have non-white players in these positions, but how much real influence and impact does it have further, as you go down the kind of cricketing ladder in real life situations? But you're right. It is a great. It's a start, isn't it? And it's got to start somewhere.
I think to sum it up for the listeners, with Yorkshire coming up, something to do some research is to see back in time who the international overseas players have been that might speak about what the culture has been in Yorkshire. But exciting topic it was exciting to have you, Mark, on the show. A topic I know It's a hard topic to have a chat because it is something that is out there. It unsettles a lot of, everyone when it comes to racism. So we've thoroughly enjoyed listening at ground level what's happening up there. Just a quick game. I'm not sure. I heard you say you loved the 96 World Cup. We normally try to get in some games. So the game we're going to play today is we're going to go at a round each, naming the World Cup winning squad. Whoever cannot name it is out of the
Oh
world.
God! Oh man, this is like someone's giving me a test about how Sri Lankan you are.
Yeah. 96. I'll let you start if you want to name a player.
Oh right. God, I'm like, where should I start? Like, because I don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go simple. Aravinda De Silva.
Right.
Sanat?
3. Back at you, Mark.
Oh, sorry. Who did you say? I missed that.
I said Sanat, Jayasuriya.
Oh, okay. Mahanama.
Hashan.
Kalu,
Murali.
Guru Singh.
Pramodya.
Oh God. Oh. Oh God.
There you go.
Oh God. I grew up, I went to school in England. It wasn't on the national curriculum like it was.
Do you want to pass?
I'm gonna have to pass. Sorry, guys.
Saminda Was.
Oh,
Kumar
shit.
Ramasena.
Pushpa Kumara.
I didn't realise Chaminda Vas was. I'd forgotten that Chaminda Vas was in the squad. Oh my God, you really showed me up, man.
There's two more. There's two more.
No, I'm out. I'm well out now. The sad thing is, I've got it framed on my wall. You can't see it.
You should have looked back. You should have.
It's because of the way. I'll show you the picture. You guys finish it off, and I'll get the picture. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
What did we miss? We miss.
Chandana, Mama Natapatu.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we got everyone. But Vida, up to you. Do we want to? Oh, wow, that's good.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, you got to keep it in, man. Keep it in.
Thanks for joining us today, Mark. I mean, we had that was really interesting. I mean, we learned a lot. If our listeners want to know more about you, where can they find you, Mark?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mark Machado. I'm on Instagram. I don't really use it that much. Insta Machado, and I'm obviously on Twitter. The Murali End podcast is called Murali Pod as well, and we don't just we try and cover as much cricket around the world because we've got loads of us who just jump on and do pods whenever anything happens. Wow. So yeah, just give us a follow on that, and we try and put funny stuff out. I don't know how much you guys would laugh.
Nah. You guys should definitely check it out. We'll add all the links in our show notes as well. Then you can follow Mark and the podcast. Anything else you want to add, Bora, before we wrap up?
Big thank you to Mark once again. The listeners out there, he's listening to the podcast that Mark's got on Murali End. Again, lovely banter, different side to the game. Yeah, keep up the good work, mate. We'll be keenly following your episodes as we go along.
Yeah, we'll definitely try and get you guys on with the Lanka Premier League starts with the Sri Lanka Cricket Podcast Murali End mashup. I'm just worried now after my performance in that game whether like the Sri Lankan white van's going to turn up and then can't be away.
Hey, we'll try to get you back again before the Ashes, if that's possible. Then we should have a quick chat about England's chances in Ashes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anytime you want. What I could also do, I can get one of the other guys who support England to come on as well.
Let's do that. That'll be awesome.
They may be better than me because I don't really I follow him. I know what's going on because obviously I'm here, but they get more excited about it. I think England have a pretty decent chance, especially if they've got Stokes back as well.
Yeah. He's here already. A few of the players have landed here already, so it's going to be an interesting series. If you want to send us feedback and if you have any questions, send it to srilankancricketpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks for having me, guys. That was brilliant.